Why do some people stay poor, no matter how hard they work? It's a question we've debated for centuries. Is it all about individual choices, or is it a systemic trap? Well, today, we're going to dive into a massive, groundbreaking study that might just give us a real, concrete answer and a way to escape.
So this is really the core of it all, isn't it? Is poverty a reflection of someone's individual talent and drive, or is it more like economic quicksand, a trap that, once you're in it, is almost impossible to get out of on your own? For the longest time, economists have basically been split into two camps on this. So let's break down these two big ideas, because you really have to understand them to see how we might actually solve the problem.
Okay, so here's a great way to think about it. Imagine an economic ladder. The equal opportunity view says, hey, we all have access to the same ladder. If some people don't climb as high, well, that's due to their own skills or motivation. But the poverty trap view says, whoa, hold on. It argues that the poorest people don't even have a ladder to climb. Or if they do, the bottom rungs are missing. They can't even get started, not because they can't climb, but because they can't reach that first step.
And this quote it cuts right to the heart of the poverty trap idea. It's saying the fundamental problem isn't the person, their dreams, or how hard they're willing to work. The problem is their starting point. It's zero. You can't invest in your future when you're stuck in a desperate fight just to survive today.
So, which one is it? How on earth could you even settle a debate like this? I mean, think about it. How do you separate someone's natural talent from the opportunities they've been given in life? It seems almost impossible. Well, it turns out a team of researchers designed a massive, real-world experiment to do just that.
And that brings us to rural Bangladesh. This was the setting for what might be one of the most important studies on poverty ever done. It was designed with one specific goal in mind: to finally figure out if poverty is about the person or their starting conditions.
The idea was actually pretty simple, but totally brilliant. Researchers identified thousands of the absolute poorest women in these villages. I mean, women with basically nothing. Then they randomly split them into two groups, and for one of those groups, they gave them a single, potentially life-changing asset. And for about 90% of them, that asset was a cow.
And to really understand the world these women lived in, just look at these numbers. This is what things looked like before the experiment. The ultra-poor had assets worth about 5,000 taka. The wealthiest people in the same villages had assets worth over 800,000. And look at their income. They were making the same rock-bottom hourly wage as the next group up. The gap they were trying to cross was it was a chasm.
So this was the big billion-dollar question. Could this one big push, this one cow, be enough to actually break the cycle of poverty for good? Or would these women just end up sliding back to where they started? To find out, the researchers followed them for over a decade.
So what happened? After 11 years, all the data was in, and the results, well, they were stunning and incredibly clear. This experiment gave us a definitive answer to that age-old debate.
The evidence pointed to one thing. The poverty trap is real. It's a measurable, observable thing. It's a vicious cycle where not having money is both the cause and the effect of being poor.
But here's where it gets really mind-blowing. The researchers didn't just find a trap. They found the edge of it. They found a clear, identifiable line, a threshold, that literally separated the people who would escape poverty from those who would fall right back in. And what happened on either side of that invisible line is just incredible. Look at these two paths. If getting that cow was enough to push a woman's total assets just over that threshold, she was out. Her wealth didn't just stay there. It kept growing year after year. But if she started with a little bit less, and that same cow wasn't quite enough to get her over the line, the opposite happened. Her assets slowly drained away, and she slid all the way back down to where she started.
And this is the absolute kicker. The women who succeeded weren't more talented. They weren't harder working. Statistically, they were identical to the women who didn't make it. The only thing that made a difference was whether that one-time gift was big enough to push them over the tipping point. The poverty trap view was correct.
Okay, so the trap is real. But why? What makes it so powerful and so hard to escape on your own? Well, the research shows it's a combination of what's happening in your head and what's happening in your wallet. First, let's talk about this psychological part. It's something called the scarcity mindset. Think of your brain like a computer. Living in poverty is like running that computer with 100 tabs open at once, all flashing red alerts. Just juggling the day-to-day stress of bills and food consumes all of your mental bandwidth, leaving no room for anything else.
And let's be super clear here. This isn't a character flaw. It's a normal cognitive response to a relentless, high-stress environment. When your mind is totally consumed with just surviving today, you literally don't have the mental resources left to make the long-term plans and investments needed to get ahead.
And that mental tax connects directly to the economics of the trap. Take a look at the kinds of assets people own. The poor typically have small things like chickens or goats. They're low cost, but they also have very low returns. The better-off villagers have cows and land, big, expensive assets that generate a lot more income. The problem is, you can't buy 1/10 of a cow to get started. You need a big chunk of money all at once, which is impossible to save up when you're stuck in that scarcity mindset.
Okay, I know this sounds pretty bleak. We've got a trap, and we know why it's so incredibly hard to escape. But here's the really hopeful part. The experiment didn't just identify the problem, it actually revealed a clear solution.
And this chart just shows you exactly what's at stake here. Look at this. Before the program, almost all these women, 97%, were stuck doing odd jobs for tiny wages. But the economic models show that with enough capital, 90% of those same women were perfectly suited for much more productive work, like raising livestock. This isn't just a poverty trap, it's a massive, tragic waste of human potential.
So, what's the escape plan? It's exactly what the experiment proved works. A big push. A single large transfer of capital that's big enough to shove someone clean over that asset threshold, letting them switch from dead-end jobs to a much more productive livelihood.
And this finding really challenges a lot of our common approaches to fighting poverty. It suggests that programs like Microfinance, which give out very small loans, often just aren't enough. Sure, they might help a little bit on the margins, but they're not big enough to break the trap for most people. It's like trying to help someone jump across a 10-foot canyon by giving them a 1-foot running start. It's just not going to get them across.
And that leaves us with one final, really powerful question. This research suggests that extreme, persistent poverty isn't some unsolvable mystery. We actually have a tested, proven blueprint for helping people escape it for good. So the question isn't really, how do we do it anymore? The question is, what are we waiting for?